It is my pleasure now to introduce our live speaker. Today we have with us David Hanson. David is local pastor at Yakima Vineyard Church. He's also the founder and principal of Sunrise Outreach Center, located also in downtown Yakima. David and his wife Teresa moved to the downtown area more than 10 years ago. And what he's going to share with us is his story about how he had an idea, about how he could change. Just the simple act of changing some of his surroundings and impact the greater community. Please welcome Dave Hanson.
So I've been a pastor for about the last 9 years. I've started Sunrise Outreach Center pretty close to that same time period. At Sunrise, we're interested in feeding families and housing our homeless. We're interested in community mobilization and organizational networking. Most recently, we've been very involved in providing housing and education for traumatized teens, both boys and girls. But the discussion tonight really isn't about Vineyard, and it's really not about Sunrise Outreach. This evening, I'd really like to talk about you and me, and the difference that we can make in our community with really very little time. It's amazing what a little bit of time and a little bit of energy can produce when we all work together. This evening, before we get started, I have this question. Does everybody know what a square looks like? Raise your hand if you know what a square looks like. Okay, so this is kind of an easy question, but one I suspect that you may not be able to figure out right away. So I'm going to give you some time to think about this. But as you're processing it, think in terms of a square and 3 lines horizontal and 3 lines vertical. Now I'm going to take this off and we'll come back to it later, but be thinking about this. And as you're thinking about it, I really want you to think about the possibilities. Think about the possibilities. Use a little imagination. So we'll get back to this in a bit. This is a cedar shingle. This is supposed to weigh almost nothing. This is a cedar shingle that has a lot of paint on it. This has been painted literally dozens and dozens and dozens of times. This shingle belongs to this house. Now, the current owner of this house happens to be here this evening. Here's the thing, though. When my wife and I moved to this house roughly 10, 11 years ago, there were a lot of real serious problems. I can honestly say that we heard gunfire from this house pretty much on a weekly basis. It was really a part of the routine. We saw gang activities where gangs that lived in houses literally across the street from us would move from one house to another house, sometimes with chains and bats and all kinds of crazy things. In the living room, in the bedroom of this house, while my wife and I were sleeping, the house next door, which I don't think was more than 10 feet away from us, had all of the windows broken out at 2 o'clock in the morning. So it was kind of a dangerous area. I think we can say that as an understatement. Now, graffiti on the back of this house was really a problem. To say that we were hit with graffiti 2 or 3, 4 times a week was just part of the routine. There was this truck that would come by, a little flatbed truck, and it would have a porta-john in the back of the cab, and a little further in back there would be a paint sprayer. And there would be 4, 5, 6 of these 5-gallon cans of paint. And they would go up and down the alley and spray everything, battleship gray. Now, if you had a house that was battleship gray, I could see where you would be grateful. But for anybody else, it was kind of a really difficult thing to have to live with. You know, as I would sit in the living room, you could hear when the truck was going to come down the street. So you could get up and just watch them spray the back of the house. And, you know, again, this was such a ridiculous routine. And it started to get old for me when the shingles on the side of the house started to not be on the side of the house anymore. They started to fall off. What was happening was that because the cedar is so thin, especially atop, it would begin to split where the nails were. The weight of the shingles would make them fall down on the ground. And one after another, they were routinely falling off the back of the house. And so I got to a point where I think I had had enough. And so we wanted to become somewhat vulnerable with a solution that we thought might just have an impact. We decided to paint this house. This earth tone green, we call it, was the color that we decided on. And we painted the windows this white trim, just the way you see it. We did this and also put up a light. This was a barn light. We put it on kind of the pitch of the roof. It automatically comes on when it gets dark and automatically goes off when it gets light. So it didn't take a lot of energy to really think about it, but it created enough light in the back that we could look out the windows at night and see what was going on. We also made this decision that we were going to paint the house next to us. And ultimately, we painted the house next to that as well. And so this is a shot from kind of the front street. And as you look down, you can see our greenhouse in the center. And if you look real hard, you see the yellow house to the right and the red house in the foreground. So we started putting flower gardens in. It started cutting the lawns. Not that we weren't cutting our lawn before, but our neighbors started cutting their lawns. And they started watering it. And gardens were starting to shoot up all over the place. The house on the opposite corner to us kind of got caught up in the energy of this, and they painted their house. And it turned out beautiful. I mean, who would have known it was such a beautiful home? Big old 3-story house, and it was just beautiful when they finished it. The house on the far corner, where gang members lived, we knew them because we were actually ministering to them through the church, so we knew them by name, and we knew which gang they belonged to, and so forth. There was a house fire there, and one of the gang members actually passed away in that fire. It sat empty for a long time. But after we painted all of these houses and did all this work, the new owner put up new siding and redid the house, and it really became beautiful. The long and short of it is, one by one, gang members started moving away, and families were starting to move in. As soon as we finished painting those 3 houses and doing these gardens and putting up this light, this was all within just a couple of months' time period. We went 6 years, and we're only hit with graffiti as a tag once in that 6-year period. It made a difference. And as we were trying to understand the difference, or what specifically caused it, initially we thought, just painted house. Maybe that was enough. Or maybe it was the light, and that was enough. But on the premise of that, we had an opportunity to be part of a Luis Palau event through the church that we were doing. There was a city cleanup that preceded the 2-day event, Luis Palau that weekend. And so a lot of churches were plugged in, and a lot of churches were involved with a lot of different cleanup efforts. We were just becoming part of Yakima Valley's Faith and Families team. And we were anxious to really connect with churches and bring churches together to work together on projects. So we saw an opportunity there. This school, Large Lincoln Elementary, was hit with graffiti as often as our house was, maybe more. This was in an area of town, or is in an area of town where graffiti was a very big problem when we started this process. So the collection of churches and community members put together roughly 300 people, and we started painting this building. And we took 2 weekends, about 300 people each, and we painted the entire outside of the church, of the school, I'm sorry. Freudian slip, I think. And inside the gymnasium, we painted that as well. We washed all the windows on the outside of the school, and we did a lot of yard work during those 2 weekends. Young and old were involved, and it was really a lot of fun. This was not such a terrible day. Just the idea of being in community and being together actually made it a really enjoyable experience. As we were progressing along this line of thinking, we saw that graffiti was still a real big problem in town. And so graffiti kind of became a focal point for this Faith and Families team that was working with St. Yakima. And so we searched out the area of town that was having the greatest difficulty with graffiti. And it turned out to be an area between 5th Avenue and 16th Avenue and Lincoln and Fruitvale. I think that's called District 4 or District 3. I can't remember, but it's in that area. In any case, as we decided to focus on this area, we decided we were going to involve the community in the process. So there's Garfield Elementary School in there, so we asked the principal to come out and start meeting with us. We asked the police to come out and participate. We had the court system and probation for juvenile justice all came out. And before we knew it, we had a whole big roundtable of people that were meeting for quite a long time on a weekly basis as we were working on what can we do and how can we really have a big impact in this specific area. And so this Graffiti Be Gone effort took shape. And so we, again, put together about 300 people. And we got together at the Albertsons parking lot, and we did work assignments on who was going to do what. In this effort, we saw city council members that were there. They wanted to be a part of the solution. We saw county commissioners that were there. They wanted to help. In fact, the county called the landfill and made a provision for us to be able to go in there and use that as a free dumping ground for our vehicles for that day. So we really got a lot of community support. These are the kind of piles that we saw on the streets. We had people that had their own pickup trucks. And pickup trucks would be kind of the team leads. And there'd be just a group of, half a dozen to 8 or 9 volunteers that would go with that pickup truck. And they'd go load these up the back of the pickup truck as they go. And then we had these big, huge dumpsters lined up in the Albertsons parking lot. And we would fill those things up. Maybe some familiar faces in this team. This is just one of the projects. Now, as you can see, we were spraying over the graffiti ourselves. We weren't completely repainting the buildings and making the buildings beautiful. But we had the same result. Graffiti in this area basically went away. And if you go in that area now and look for yourself, you won't find very much graffiti at all. Understanding graffiti was a serious problem when we did this at that point. Now this year, we've done another program that was just like this. We did it in the Southeast Community Center area. And we had 200, 250 folks that showed up for that initiative as well. And so we really started to see that it was making a difference. We could see with our own eyes as we would drive up and down the streets that graffiti, not only in these areas, but all throughout Yakima was starting to go down further and further. I used to be able to drive up and down South 6th Street, going back and forth from the church where I worked to the house. And I'd see graffiti on every block. I don't see graffiti anymore in that area at all. So, every once in a while it pops up here and there, but it's quickly removed by the city. And so I think we're seeing some real progress there. But on November, Yakima did a report, and stated in that report, was put on the Yakima Herald the following day, that there was a 37% decrease in graffiti since last year. That there's been a 75% reduction in graffiti since 2013. Wow. This is just a couple of afternoons. It's just a couple of afternoons. This didn't take somebody working night and day and doing all kinds of crazy work and a high-paying salary. This is something where the community decided that we could work together and accomplish a big thing. So, what a difference a little time and effort can make. So there's generally 3 ways that we can be plugged into and involved in our community. There's provision of basic services. There's intervention. Now this is all about giving services and mentoring and just wanting to be in relationship with kids that really need help. And then there's prevention. And this is the area I think I'm the most excited about. And this is an area where we really start pouring into education of our kids. We decide that we can help them by mentoring them and training them and making school available to them. Also job skill development. These are great opportunities. In the homes that we run for troubled teen kids, these are kids that have been heavily traumatized and they haven't been functioning well in school. Some of them have been out a couple of years by the time we get them. And they're only 13 at that point. So our mission in life is to get them back in school and get them focused on the possibilities there. But there are lots of ways that you can be involved in this community. Has anybody figured out how many squares there are yet? It's going to be hard for me to see hands, but I'll try. Go ahead.
25?
25.
No, 26.
No, 26? Okay, that's not right.
I think I've got 30.
30 is not right, and 29 is not right.
142.
42 is definitely not right. 28 is not right. Now wait a minute. Wait. Everybody knows what a square looks like. Everybody knows what a square looks like, right? So it's not complicated. I just want to know how many squares there are. Back in the back.
16.
No.
22.
No. Okay. I'm going to try to walk you through this. But remember, right in the very beginning, I said you really had to use a little imagination. You really had to think about it a little bit. You had to see the possibilities. No. So can we agree that nobody's got the right answer yet, right? But everybody knows what a square looks like. So 4 times 4 is? 16. So if you take the 4 in that corner, the 4 in the middle, and the 4 on that side, and then the 4 in the middle here, the 4 in the middle there, that's 3 times 3 is 9. So 25 with the 16 that we previously counted. And then if you take these big blocks, like this, and count those, then 2 times 2 is 4, so now we're at 29. And then the big square is 30. But that's not how many squares there are. 31. the word squares.
Yeah.
So when you're really thinking about it, when you're really looking for the possibilities, you need to think outside the box a little bit. Okay? So we're going to continue to give you opportunities to do street cleanups. I anticipate that we'll do at least one downtown and probably one or two in the county this year. So look for those, and if you have an opportunity and a little bit of time that you can get plugged into that, you can be part of a solution. But you don't have to wait for us. You can go to any elementary school in this town and say, I want to help kids learn how to read. Every one of those elementary schools is looking for people like you that will sit down with their students and listen to them read and correct them when they get it wrong and support them when they feel frustrated. It's a very simple thing. Do you have any idea how much change you could make in those kids' life by helping them learn how to read? It's a big thing. Also, we have lots of mentoring opportunities throughout the town in all the different kinds of genres. There's the Aspire program at the YMCA. What a great mentoring program that is, right? You can get plugged in there just by contacting Bob Monero over at the YMCA. Madison House on South 4th Street. That is a really great program in the downtown region. We really want to encourage you to consider being part of that. There's always Rod's House. I have in the past been a part of that board that is really a good organization. I'd really encourage you to think about spending some time there as well. You can always help at one of our 2 teen residential areas, residential homes, residential and education centers. There's lots of ways, in other words, that you can get plugged into your community, and with just a little bit of time and a little bit of effort, you can make a great big difference. You can prevent a tragic outcome with just a little bit of time and a little bit of effort. Will you continue to wait? Or will you become part of the solution? How heavy is your shingle? Thank you. Are there any questions?
Hey, I'm glad you asked that question, because as I was listening to your fantastic presentation, one question did come to mind. Did you and your wife ever think at any point, why are we doing this? Why did you decide to move down here?
When we first moved, we were on the west side of town. I was working the tail end of a 30-year career at that point. And I had a calling in my life. I don't know how to describe a calling, but I definitely, very, very clearly had a calling. The calling was fairly specific. We were supposed to sell or give away everything we had, and we were supposed to move down to this area. And outreach was very, very specific to be our mission. Now, at the church that I belonged in, we had a food pantry that was going at the time. It was still fairly small, but it was a functional food bank that was helping a lot of folks. So that was our starting point. But then everything else kind of happened more by us becoming aware of things in our immediate surroundings than by us having this gigantic plan that we were going to go out and try to do something specific. The extreme weather shelters, we did those for the first 9 years of their existence. And that started when a young man who had been part of our church in the past had become homeless. And he asked us what we thought about churches hosting shelters. So that's how we got involved in that. You know, we never wanted to do anything without doing it well. So we spent a lot of our time benchmarking best practices. I think I've traveled to 7 states and we've been to Canada 4 times. Just trying to learn from people who have been doing this a lot longer and a lot better than us, and trying to pick up as many tools and strategies as we possibly could. But, you know, no, there was no big picture in the beginning of this. It all just kind of happened.
Right. Well, thank you for that wonderful presentation and great example of how a person can start with an idea and actually can be a catalyst for change in their community. Thank you.
Thank you.